greater than X.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to a very special episode of The Extra Mile. I am one of your hosts, Ryan Turford, the man on the moose, or the weatherman on the moose, depending on, which man on the moose, flavor you prefer. And I'm joined by our social media manager himself, Court Lalonde. Court, how are you doing today?
I'm good. I guess I don't have a nickname yet. I'm just social media manager for now.
I called you the Boston Bruins fan on stream, but even then, that's not even really a good nickname. That's just a hockey team you like. So
I definitely am that. Matt always calls me the Dark Knight of Xbox. That's what he's got
that's
for
a good
me
one.
right now.
That's a good one.
It's not bad because I do thoroughly like Batman, just a wee bit.
Yeah.
But I also like hockey. You know what? I'm all over the map. I'm also a dad. Like, to me, that's what I am. To me, I'm just a dad.
Yeah. I mean, you're just an enigma to be, Court, more than anything.
I'm even wearing a Batman shirt, and that wasn't even purposeful. That was just what I put on today.
Good Lord. Well, this is The Extra Mile, of course, the tag-along podcast to the PlayStation Drive or the Xbox Drive or the Nintendo Drive, because this will be available on all three of those feeds, because this is the show where we talk about all of the games that you care about most and kind of do like a review discussion or in-depth discussions about certain topics. And this week, Court, I think we've got a pretty exciting topic, and that is Lego Star Wars, the Skywalker Saga, our full review discussion, all about the game. We've been playing it, and we're ready to talk about it. We've both finished the game. Court, which console did you play it on, by the way? Because it's available on pretty much everything.
I played it on an Xbox Series X.
Cool, because that is also where I played it, although I did play some of it on Series S as well. And I've got things to say about both versions, because there's some discrepancy between the two of them, but it's also available on Switch as well as on PS4, PS5, Xbox One, pretty much everything you find games on as well. So you can check it out there. Also, we did purchase the games ourselves. It wasn't provided to us ahead of time. We always like to disclose whether or not, codes were given to us for certain games. And last but not least, Court, since we both mentioned we finished the game, did you change any of the difficulty settings or leave it on kind of the default settings? What did you play on?
I definitely was one of the very first things I did was get rid of the fall damage. That was like literally the first, when whenever I'm playing a game, I go down the YouTube rabbit hole of the people that have created videos at it. Mm-hmm. But I don't get into how do you get this achievement or trophy or whatever platform you're playing on. I always go into the 5 things you need to know. Game Ranks is one of my favorites. And the very number one thing Jake Baldino said was turn off fall damage. It says when you do it in the accessibility settings that you're supposed to lose your stud still. You don't. Mm-hmm. So that's one thing I noticed right off the bat, because I did notice that for the first time ever in a Lego game, your second character was kind of mindless.
Yeah.
And the AI on it was bad.
Yeah.
And also I did play this a ton with my daughter. She's only 5. So turning off fall damage for her was phenomenal, because this, once again, also different from a Lego game. There was a lot of open world, and there was a lot of areas where you could just fall off the map.
Yeah.
Like a lot that they weren't there in any previous Lego game. So I played, my daughter and I played the 4, 5, and 6 together. And then I played 1, 2, and 3. And then she played 7 and 8 with me. So she played a lot of this game with me, and she enjoyed her time. Yes, but one of the things I did was turn off the fall damage, to answer your question.
Okay, absolutely. Whereas I just didn't change anything. I just played on, the default stock settings. Because again, we always like to talk about, if we felt we needed to change the difficulty or if we changed it in some ways, just so people understand kind of our perspective on things. But anyways, we should start with kind of service level thoughts kind of on Lego Star Wars. I'll start, Court, and to give you some time to think a little bit. But for me personally, going into this game, I was pretty excited about it. I like the Lego games. I've played all the Lego games in the past. Although I come into it, and I don't know how you feel about this, Court. I mean, I came into this coming off Lego Dimensions, which I think is definitely my all-time favorite Lego game, even after playing Lego Star Wars, because of the way it kind of incorporated all these different franchises together. But also it just had a really good story on its own that wasn't really tied to a specific franchise. It kind of had its own story and then kind of worked in a lot of the franchises into it. And then had a lot of really great offshoot ideas and gameplay ideas that I was hoping would make its way into this game. And there is definitely some of that. And I'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about more about the in-depth about the gameplay. But I kind of figured after Lego Dimensions, it would be tough for a non-Dimensions Lego game to top like my list of Lego games going forward because of how good Lego Dimensions was. And I was coming in with a little bit of a bias coming into this game because of that. At the same time, I still had a pretty good time with this game. I know that, you know, if you've been listening to the Xbox Drive for a couple of weeks, I've been talking about this game and how I was like, you know, I didn't start off strong with this game, but I think towards the end of the game, I came in liking it more than I did at kind of the beginning. But I do think that there are some qualms that I'm going to get into in a little bit that kind of keep this game from being kind of the top tier of Lego games for me personally. But Court, I'm interested to hear what you have to say because I think you have a completely different perspective than I do about this game.
Well, it's funny you mentioned Lego Dimensions because that's mine as well. My favorite Lego game of all time. And solely based on the franchises. I got to play Goonies. I got to play Ghostbusters. I got to play Back to the Future. I got to play The Simpsons. It was the first time I was like, oh my God, this is the Lego game that speaks to me. But I found this was different than any Lego game I have ever played previously. And suffice to say, I think 100% besides that Lego Worlds, I have finished every single Lego game ever, except Lego Worlds. That game just wasn't for me. This game to me was open world, was so different than any other Lego game. It felt like, as a person that loves Ubisoft games and going into and just, you know, go here on the map and go do this, this, and this. I remember at one point, I think I messaged you and I was like, oh yeah, I'm going to mainline it so I can have it ready for a review. And then I think I messaged again. I was like, okay, so I just did side quests for the last 2 hours. Whoops. I found myself doing that over and over again. I had a very hard time, in a good way, mainlining this game because I really enjoyed the little conversations that you're having with side characters. Along the way, you'd have a little conversation over here, and then they would make these typical Lego jokes that are, you know, poo-poo humor, I call it. And then I'm like, well, I'm going to want to go do that. And then next thing you notice, I'm in my ship and I'm going to here and I'm going there and I'm going to all these different planets to go do that. And then as you go to the planets, you see like, okay, there's a Kyber crystal off here, off to the right that you can just go get 5 of them right away. You're like, all right, let me just go do that real quick. And then you see a space battle and you're like, you know, there's an achievement if I do. You know what? I'm just going to go do this real quick. So then you've cleared out everything in space. You're like, oh yeah, I've got to go do that mission still. And then I found myself getting lost in the world, which is a good thing. Like, I can say this, I mainlined it so that we could do this, but I'm not done with this game. I think I want to 100, I want 1,000, I want to get 1,000%. Like I want it all. Like I want to do it all because I really enjoyed the characters. They've given us more characters than they ever have in a little Lego game. And I really like the fan service that they've added to this game as the little droid. I don't know what it's called. The little, and they put the Stormtrooper's head on it and it's on every level.
Oh, okay. BB-8 possibly, or
no,
or
not
R2-D2?
BB-8. No. It's a little car that goes around.
Oh, yes. I know which one you're referring to.
I don't know the name of it, but it's from it's from 4, 5, and 6.
Right.
And it goes through a round. And if they also do the thing, if you're playing 4, the Stormtrooper hits his head, which I was like, well done. And then after he hits his head, that's when you start seeing that robot show up in all the levels. And I actually had to watch a YouTube video saying that until you do that, that little robot guy doesn't show up. You've got to go through where the Stormtrooper hits his head and then you knock his helmet off and then boom, all of a sudden it's on top of the droid and it goes throughout. So there's a lot of great little Easter eggs throughout the game. And I felt as a Star Wars fan, the fan service they put into this game was unbelievable. Like I said it to my brother, who is a very big Star Wars fan. I said, this is probably one of the best Star Wars games I have ever played. Yeah.
I mean, I can't disagree with you on that. And yeah, there was a ton of fan service and we should probably dive into at least like the story stuff first before we kind of go further with that, because definitely it's not very often that well, first of all, when you look back on the history of Star Wars games in particular, a lot of it's like extended universe stuff or side stories. It's not very often that we get games based off the movies themselves, let alone, you know, the mainline franchise. We had the Super Star Wars games and the Star Wars games, both on the NES and the Super NES. And then we had the episode 1 game that was on the PS1, and that game's terrible. But that one actually exists and is there.
And pod racers.
Yeah, we had Pod Racer as well. But again, those are like kind of like side missions. Because again, Pod Racer, for the most part, you just do the Tatooine mission. And that's the only thing from the movie that's actually there. And then beyond that, we had Lego Star Wars, the original kind of trilogy, and then the prequel trilogy. And then we had, Force Awakens a couple
and
years
Clone
ago.
Wars. Yeah, we had everything. Like Lego Star Wars, that is.
Right. But beyond that, though, we haven't really had a game that tackles all 9 movies, let alone even the first 6 movies in one game before.
Not even that. We know that we're getting Han Solo, we're getting Rogue One, we're getting The Mandalorian. Like I bought this super duper deluxe. I bought that $110 Canadian. I bought it all because I want to play every story.
Exactly. So we haven't had this kind of celebration in Star Wars at all in one game, which I think I have to applaud this game for. I think to your point about the fan service, like you could definitely tell fans of Star Wars who have been fans of Star Wars for a long time made this game. From all the little in-jokes that are in the game to the way even just the story is presented, to the fact that like all of the beats that happen throughout the story are like the story beats that you'd want to see from these movies come to, like, even though there's a section where you have to go to, the Gungan city in episode 1, where I don't know if I ever wanted to do that in a game, but you can do that. That's part of the game. Like, because again, that's part of making those movies kind of flow together. And I feel like the pacing of the story in particular, I think is really well done. Plus the cutscenes, I think are really goofy and fun. And I think you probably agree with that, right, Court?
I 100% agree with it. And I even found they did a very good job of not fluffing up the story. Like they just got to it. I did find it a bit weird that they get into story missions and they have mini open worlds inside the story. Once again, you can go on different paths. And like, once again, as someone that when he sees different paths, he goes in them. I know that on certain levels, I think it was in 2 when we're 2 or 1 when you go to the Android factory there.
Yeah. And in Camino.
That level could have been done in very quickly, but I took way too long on that. I was just doing everything. And then I'm like, oh, I can see that and do this and do that. So, but I felt that they did a very good job of writing of the story and saying, okay, this can be left out and we can put just a little joke in here. And then I'll let you know as a Star Wars fan, well, this was supposed to be in there. Like they did such a good job on the jokes. Like they made fun of Star Wars, but of the way a fan of Star Wars would.
Yes, exactly. Like from little things like pulling out a banana instead of a gun to, the Emperor, doing this with like some lightning, like Lego pieces and stuff like.
Shoot First is in there.
Yep. Exactly.
Shoot First is in there, so they did a very good job.
So many great Lego moments, and what was interesting as well is the way they divided up the story this time, because you can't just go pick any movie that you want. You basically pick a trilogy to start with, and then as you play through the trilogy, it'll unlock the other 2 movies of that respective trilogy as you go through. But likewise, you don't have to start with episode 1 or episode 4, which is nice. I mean, if you want to play the new trilogy first, you can certainly do that. But I like the fact that the game gives you the freedom to kind of like pick and choose which way you want to go with it.
What did you start with?
So I decided just to start with episode 1 and play it like that. And the reason I decided to do it that way is I suspected from the gameplay standpoint, the developers would tailor the gameplay, assuming that you would start with either episode 1 or episode 4 first, essentially.
Because I did a chronological, and based on that, even that little robot that goes around and finding out from YouTube, I think they made it, especially the challenges throughout. This challenge only starts if you start on 4.
Right.
Until you do 4, because that robot shows up in 1, 2, and 3. But if you don't start with 4, that robot doesn't even show up.
Right.
Mind you, I think they've made it so you can start anywhere, but I get it that you started at 1. I had to call my brother and I was like, okay, like he's like, no, you have to start with 4. Like he gave me this whole dichotomy of why I had to start with 4. I'm like, all right, fine. All right, starting with 4. I get it.
Well, not only that too, but the developers purposely have the icon when you start the game start on 4. And then you can move it from there and start with a different trilogy if you want to. In fact, I was talking to some people in the Discord community, the Carpool Gaming Discord community, that didn't even know that you could start with different trilogies. They thought that you had to start with episode 4 because that's what the icon kind of started on. And then they noticed the kind of the other trilogy, other movies right next to it were locked essentially, thinking, oh, I can't change this. I have to start here essentially.
I think they did a good job though of when you like as we finish the game, and as someone like myself who wants to go back in, I want to unlock all the characters, I want to get all the rest of the kyber crystals, I want to get the little key cards to give me, because there is no red bricks. Spoiler alert for people that play Lego games all the time, red bricks are gone, and I'm actually kind of happy about it. They have the key cards where you can get, and then you can choose whatever one you want to get. Like if you want to go to the 2 times, the 4 times, obviously as a seasoned Lego person, I just went with give me more studs, but you go through and you can just choose what you want, and very easily they give you those, here's where everything is. But I did like how the planets give you your little checkbox, like, okay, this planet has this much done, this much done, this much done. And as you do the movies, those planets are unlocked. Like you can go back and do anything right away, because I found when they first started doing the open world with Lego games, and I think it was after Star Wars, I think it was Indiana Jones, the second one.
Yeah.
When they first did their open world-esque, it was very hard to go back and go, okay, I want to do these levels again. They've made it very easy to repeat and go back. I also, I'll have to say this, love the no loading screen.
Yeah.
Like, wow, playing on a next gen Lego game is unbelievable experience. I even really like the animations when you're choosing your world and it's choosing the movie and it has the little scenes as you're going through. I thought that was very well done.
Yeah. And to be fair, and to kind of throw a small correction there's not no load screens at all in this game. There are some, but it's like very, very, very minuscule.
Yeah, sorry.
In fact, a lot of times when you're transitioning between areas, it's like a screen transition that you'd see from the Star Wars movies, essentially.
I think it's because they've made it so this game is on all platforms, like on Switch and so on and so forth, that they have to include
at least some level of those. You're absolutely right.
Yeah, because like that load screen on some of them is just like the load screen is there. And I honestly think because if the game was just made for PS5 and Xbox Series X, I don't think the load screens would be there.
Right.
Like that's how quick everything pops in. I think because there are last gen versions and there is a Switch version, it was just easier to already have that in. And I've noticed that with games that have cross gen and not just that their load screens are there for no reason. Like Jedi Fallen Order, I've gone back to play it. And you can tell that load screen doesn't need to be there anymore, but they have no choice because it was already built in, right?
Absolutely. So again, I personally think as a Star Wars fan, I think you're really going to enjoy the kind of the story that they present here and kind of the way that they present this, 9, set of movies. I think that they did an excellent job with the writing and stuff. Also, before we transition away from the story, Court, quick question for you. Did you play it all with mumble mode on?
No. So I hated it.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to go back to it and I think it was a Star Wars, the Luke Skywalker, when they did Luke Skywalker was on the front and they did.
Yeah. The original trilogy, Lego Star Wars.
Yes. When they did everything, that was the first time they ever had talking in it, I believe.
No, actually the very first one that they had talking in it was Lego Lord of the Rings was the first one.
Okay.
That had it.
All right. Yeah. You're right. I'll never go back to mumble. I know the mode is there. Mm-hmm. I'll never go back to that. That to me, I actually like the voice acting in the Lego games. I think they're well done. Like as a Batman fan as well, I think the voice acting in the Lego Batman games is better than the Lego video games.
Right.
I mean, the Batman video games. And I know people love Arkham Origins, but I think they do such a good job. The voice actors in these Lego games, the people who write the scripts are top notch. You can tell they're fans and they know their stuff.
I'm not going to lie, with episodes 7, 8, and 9, Court, I totally turned mumble mode on because the voice for Kylo Ren in particular was really bugging me because it was so far off of like Adam Driver's voice that it like it just stuck in my brain. I'm like, nope, can't do this. So I'm turning mumble mode on, and I actually really enjoyed mumble mode as well. In fact, they do like the cutscenes change a little bit to kind of like have them pantomime more, which I think is like a super cool addition. I love the fact that they included it there as a toggle just in case you wanted to play it that way, which I think is just fan service going back to like all the previous Lego Star Wars games. Because to your point, Court, other than Force Awakens, this is the first time we're seeing a lot of the older movies translated with full voice acting, because the original versions of those games, both the original Lego Star Wars and Lego Star Wars 2, the original trilogy, did not have voice acting them in at all. It was mumble mode for all those games. So I love that there's an option for both. But we should talk about the gameplay a little bit, because I think like that's the more interesting part here of this discussion, because this is really the biggest overhaul to any Lego game. But at the same time, at its core, it's still just a Lego game. So the biggest change with the gameplay this time around is the third person perspective throughout the entire experience. You're not getting kind of the isometric view for the most part, whether you're controlling vehicles or if you're controlling your characters on the ground. Everything is third person, but there's some caveats that come along with it. And I'm interested to get your opinion about this, Court, because this plays into the co-op for the game, which has always been a key feature of the Lego Star Wars games, and it's now a split screen experience. So tell me, Court, that since you tried co-op and I didn't have a chance to do so, what was that experience like with the changes?
So I did it was taking some getting used to, because on the previous Lego games, my daughter and I had played a couple of them together. We did the Marvel Lego games together, and that was her first foray into Lego games. So when we weren't on the same screen, and you could literally, like, when you're on a planet, like we were on Tatooine, she could just go wherever she wanted. And it would take like minutes for me to go find her. And so like that was the minor annoyance, because in previous Lego games, they keep you on the same screen, sort of like it'll split the screen to let you know, okay, that person's no longer in eye shot, but they try and keep you together. They allow you to go do whatever you want, but you are able to start a mission and the other person just says accept, and they'll Star Trek beam them over. I'm sorry, but it's definitely what happens. Like the character just disappears off the screen and shows up on the other way. So it was different. I did like the combat system with the, being able to throw a lightsaber. So pretty much every single time, all I wanted to do was use a character with force powers, just because they could throw lightsabers.
Yep.
I was having a lot of issues with the jumps. I felt they weren't... I joked. I messaged someone. I was like, I feel like I'm playing Assassin's Creed.
Yep.
I felt like I was playing in early Assassin's Creed before they got the combat and the traversal down pat. I felt there was a lot of times where they made us do things that didn't need to be there. I was just like, okay, like, are you just forcing us to use this thing to get to where this thing is, to get this kyber crystal? I was like, all right, fine. But like, you're making me blow up this thing to pull this thing to do this other thing. And I'm like, I get it. Lego games have all these puzzles, but I felt some of them were shoehorned in for no reason. I was like, you could have just left it out and it'd still be a great story and still a Lego experience. Like, because there was less puzzles than I've ever played in a Lego game. Like I'll tell people, there's less building, there's less puzzles than I've ever played in a Lego
as far
game.
As like the mainline missions go, for sure. Like
yes.
with the open world stuff, with the collectathon aspect of this game, that's kind of where they took the puzzle element and really ran with it. But definitely in the main game, they made it a very linear experience. And actually, like I talked about this on the Xbox Drive, but even like Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, most of the time in that movie specifically, you're barely having like a linear mission at all. You're basically walking from one end of the open world to the other to trigger a cutscene. And then you do that and then a whole bunch of times. Yeah. And
lots of boss fights.
Yeah. And the pod race as well. Like you had those.
Yes.
Those are the two things were part of Phantom Menace. But beyond that, you're pretty much just walking from one cutscene to the other, essentially. And I found that changed later on with like the later trilogies, but that one in particular really stuck out with me.
And I wasn't a big fan. I know they had the cover shooting in the previous Lego Star Wars game when they did The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
But I still think they've got to figure it out, because I was just like, I don't need to cover. I don't even need to be there. Just whatever. It didn't need to be there. You don't need to use it. It was just there as almost like a trope. But I did enjoy the boss fights. I thought they were executed very well with like the telegraphing, because it is a Lego game and we know kids play. So they telegraph where the boss is going to be going with the red line or the red circle. Like this is where the guy's going to land, and you're able to get out of the way. And especially in 1, 2, and 3, because there's a ton of boss fights in those, because there are a ton of characters that you have to go up against. I felt the deaths, we'll call them deaths.
Yep.
Were very well done, and were funny, like very funny the way they made characters disappear.
Yeah. Darth Maul in particular, I love the way that they handle.
I liked Grievous too. Grievous was a good one too.
Yeah.
General Grievous, when he goes in that hangar, it's pretty good.
Definitely. Whereas it's just like when you get to 7, 8, and 9, they do the boss fights a little bit differently. But by that point, I will say about the boss fights, I did find them really repetitive, especially if you're fighting, melee enemies or saber wielding enemies in particular, like when you're fighting Kylo Ren or like any of the other Jedis. They all have the same attack patterns and they all have the same telegraph moves. And I'm still kind of hitting X on the controller over and over again to swing my saber at them. There are some nice moments in those boss fights that feel very cinematic, but I felt from the gameplay perspective, if like for me personally, I found that charm wearing off because I knew exactly how that boss fight would go down versus I think kids will really get a kick out of that. But just for me personally, as someone who's more into, third person action games and for someone who was looking for that formula to evolve at least a little bit more than that, I was a little disappointed from that. But at the same time, I understand where they're coming from as developers and why they're framed that way. But
yeah, as someone that has a 5-year-old that plays a lot of video games now, I love Star Wars. I love Lego. This game isn't made for us. So it was like, I totally get it because I was like, oh, this is kind of really easy. But then at the same time, I was like, wait a minute, you know what? I've got to take my my gamer head out of it and be like, yeah, they're making this game that 8-year-olds can play it. They're not making this game so this 42-year-old can go relive his Star Wars fantasies. They want me to buy the game, but they're making it so you can play it with your kid or your kid to play the game. The game is made for kids. So I get the simplicity of the boss fights and the simplicity of even the combat itself. I felt it was the easiest Lego game I've ever played, but not in a bad way. I felt they spent more time on story than they spent on building and puzzles, which we talked about how most of the puzzles are to do the collectathons after. But if you're someone like my daughter who just wanted to go through the story, it was perfect because it wasn't long. Mm-hmm. When I had to mainline the last 3, 7, 8, and 9, it didn't take me long. I think it just took me 3 hours, not even.
Yeah. In fact, we should, while we're on that subject, I think overall, if you just wanted to mainline this and you didn't want to do any of the open world stuff, you can finish this in about 10 to 15 hours. I found like you can finish it very, very, very quickly. But at the same time, Court, to your point about, playing this game forever, the other side of the coin is if you want to do the collectible stuff, currently howlongtobeat.com has it up if you want 100% this game at about 90 hours. Because
I can see that
stuff. Because
and then they have the DLC coming. Like another thing to TT Games, they have a roadmap already up. Mm-hmm. We already know what is coming. Like you can already use codes, and that's the other cool thing. I don't know if you realize there's little barcodes throughout the game hidden, and if you scan them, they give you Star Wars comics, and they also give you the codes to input to get the Mandalorian. Like you get the spaceship, you get the characters to start using them already because there is DLC coming. Like there is the Star Wars, there's the Han Solo, there is the Mandalorian, there's like it's all coming, which is once again, like I said, it's just fun little fan service.
Yeah. Absolutely. And in fact, like it kind of reminds me of like a fan servicey game combined with Kirby in a lot of ways. Like that's how I would sum up the gameplay. Because again, it's meant for kids. It's meant to be very easy but it's also like super cute and charming. And it's got all these characters that you love to see and kind of interact with. So,
and they didn't make it hard to get these Kyber crystals. I remember, I think it was Lego Avengers. Mm-hmm. I was like, there was some times where I was trying to get red bricks, trying to do stuff. I'm like, why are you making this so difficult? Like, who can do this? Like the timings and all that. I felt they've made this game accessible to everybody that wants to play it.
Yeah. And then what's also new to the gameplay this time around as well, and it might have been in previous other Lego games, so feel free to correct me, Cord, as well, is there's a giant skill tree for all of the different, classes for all the characters as well. So like the Jedis have their own skill tree, and then the bounty hunters have their own skill trees, and then you can kind of customize them using your bricks your studs throughout the game as you collect them. Obviously, my beginner's recommendation, though, is to kind of use the advice Court mentioned earlier, which is to kind of get your multiplier up first, then really start investing in a lot of the skill trees if you want to do that. But I love the fact that there is some depth to your character development this time around as well, and to give you a reason to spend your studs besides, using your studs to buy more studs, essentially. Which is what and
I would even recommend just using the general upgrade tree, not do the Jedi, the scavenger, or any of those. Just do the general, because then you get the studded tracks, you level up your health, get that full up, then go after Jedi and, level up your Ewok and
makes
so
sense.
on and so forth.
Now, as far as so I think we're both on the same page as we like kind of the main, linear story for this game and the gameplay that comes with that. But it's time for us to talk about the other 90% of the game, which is the open world, which I think for me personally, this is where I'm a little more lukewarm on the game because I am the type of person that history has shown with my game playing habits that I'm not a huge fan of giant collectathon games. I am. With a game like Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong 64 or a lot of newer Ubisoft games, like the second I see collectathons, I'm just kind of out the door. I'm not really into them. So for me personally, I think it's a little bit of a tougher ask to jump into this game right away because, you get a great 10 to 15 hour experience out of the game. But for the rest of the stuff, especially if I wanted more in-depth puzzles and stuff like that, like the open world collectathon just isn't really attracting me. And it hasn't really done a good job of getting me personally invested in this world in a way that I know, Court, you're in love with. But tell me, Court, what's super appealing to you about the open world? What are you really liking about it?
Well, for me, the map isn't that big. So, and I feel like the art on it is very well done. So when you're on Tatooine or you're on any of these planets, they do a very good job of making it almost look like the movies. But I like the fact that it's not so expansive and open world as it looks. Like you're on this planet, you're like, oh my God, I'm so used to playing a lot of Ubisoft games, and I like the go to this part of the map. But it wasn't like Assassin's Creed Valhalla where I was like, okay, 15 minutes later, I got to where my pinpoint was. You could clear off each planet and each open world section very easily and probably in like half-hour junkets and probably have each planet done in like 7 hours. I know it sounds a lot, but like if you wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to just clear off 1, 2, and 3 first, and then I'll do 4. Like if you did that, I would say it's probably like 10 hours each one if you just went at it. And that does, the math kind of works out to being, that's what they're saying on finishingthegame.com, I guess. But for me, this is the most Ubisoft Lego game I have ever played. If you enjoy Assassin's Creed, Watch Dogs, because that's what this is. It's just one of those games with Lego in it. And you're got Star Wars. So you're going out and you're literally collecting a ton. This is the most collections they put in any game, in a Lego game. There's a lot to pick up.
Nice. Yeah, again, if you are the type of person who loves collectathons, if you're the type of person who collected all 900 Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild, like this is your game because of the Kyber blocks, like there is like 1,500 of them to find essentially.
Yeah, there's even like little small I think it was in I can't remember what planet it is, and there's like a bar and so on and so forth, and it's not 3, 4, or 5. It's in the 1, 2, and 3s, the prequels. And there are so many kyber crystals in this one little area. There's like literally like 25 in like a 2-minute walk. Right. And it's crazy because there's like levels to this area. And I'm like, oh my God. Like I got sidetracked. I was supposed to be doing a mission. And that's the other thing. You could do side missions while you're doing the story, because you can run into characters and just go off and do whatever you want. Exactly.
It's very open, which I
and they make it very easy to change your characters. Like I know in the previous Lego games, you have to go in and do free roam or whatever. Yeah. As soon as you've done a certain section of the story, you automatically, it's like you do like a 3-minute story beat and then it puts you back in the open world. You do another 3-minute story beat. You can change your characters like right off the bat. Like when you're in the open world at any time, you can turn into any character you want.
Yeah. And ultimately, like the strategy I also would implore for people to maybe do as well is kind of play through the story first, then you unlock all the characters and then go back and then kind of do the free play stuff. Cause I mean, it's nice to kind of do some of that stuff along the way, to kind of break up the monotony of the main story, even though I know it's not monotonous, but you know what I mean? But at the same time, like it's so much easier to do all the missions that are there once you have all the character types unlocked, because then you can basically complete everything without worrying, oh, I don't have a character of this specific class who is needed to do this one specific collectible, essentially.
And also, if you find a kyber crystal or a puzzle or a little mini missions, I called them, to unlock said crystals or unlock said collectibles, it saves it on your map. So unlike other Lego games where you're like, you do the level and you got to remember, or you have to find a red brick first that even shows you where everything is. Once you found it, it's on your map.
Yeah.
So you can go into your map, which one of my biggest complaints is how not seamless the map was. You have to click on it again, click on the planet, and then for Xbox, press the X button to get into the map and then start using the map. It wasn't very, the UI for it just wasn't that good to me.
Like almost as if there should have been a separate tab that was for the map of the area you're in and then the tab for the galaxy, essentially.
100%. Yeah. It seemed like a weird choice. I don't know.
For sure. So
as someone who does collectathons, that is a big pain in my butt.
Yeah. And I can imagine, like, especially with a game like this, where again, you've got so much stuff to collect, like an hour 50 or 60, are you really going to be fuddling through all these like small menus to get to stuff? Like, that's probably not the experience you really
especially if you're on a planet and you're already like in an area and you're like going to look for something. You have to press the, I guess there's no pause button anymore. You press the line button on the Xbox controller, and it takes you right back to the planets. And then you've got to find the planet again, press it on the planet, then go into the planet, and then find the area of where you are in the planet, and then click on that to get to the map. And I'm like, really? I'd be interested to know what it's like to play on the PS5, because usually the map is the middle button.
Right.
You just press it. I'm wondering if the map pops up. I wonder if there's maybe a shortcut, maybe something I missed.
Maybe, but I'm thinking that big middle button is just what the select button equivalent is on Xbox.
Yes.
So, but now that we've got that all the way, there are some little nitpicky things I need to talk about here as part of this review, because I did run into some issues with the game. First of all, in the first week that the game was out, I actually ran into a game-breaking bug where I couldn't proceed any further in the game.
Oh, really?
Where essentially at Star Wars Episode 2, there's a section where you're chasing Boba Fett after you leave Kamino, or sorry, Jango Fett, I should say. And when I went to basically the space around Kamino to then fly to the story point in space to then chase after Jango Fett and basically to unlock, Geonosis as a planet, that there was an issue where as it was transitioning, the game froze. And as I came back to it, that objective had been checked off that I had completed it, but it didn't unlock the planet or unlock the story any further. So I couldn't proceed with the game at all. There was a patch like a couple days after the game came out that fixed that. So that is something that has been fixed. But I've noticed, and I don't know if you've run into the same issue on playing on Xbox, Court, but basically sometimes the game, when I continue a game from the beginning of the game, it just goes to a screen of just the stars, but it never proceeds.
I have had that. Quick resume doesn't work very well. I'm finding quick resume not working on third-party games a lot. And it's almost a frustration I have. And I know it's not Xbox's fault. I'm sure they've given them here's what you need to do, because first-party Xbox games work quick resume works perfect. And even Ubisoft games, for some reason, quick resume works on the Division 2. You get to bypass everything and just go to the loading screen of getting into the open world part. So I had that. I had the stars. I also had an issue where I would go and get my spaceship anywhere where you can go to those places, and I couldn't get in it. The spaceship would be there. I could not get in it, and I couldn't go any further, and I had to turn the game off and turn it back on. Now that I have looked, and there hasn't been any patch notes to fix that issue, and that issue happened to me a lot.
That issue happened to me last night, Court. So just throwing it out there, it's still there. But the stars thing, actually, I don't think it's a quick resume thing, because I have never had this game in quick resume.
Oh, okay.
Still did it every time, because I've been going between consoles. Because I have an Xbox Series S at my desk and a Series X in my other room. So I've been closing the game every single time on purpose.
But yes, but when you're going between consoles, that is almost like, as someone who has the X here and an X downstairs, that is almost like quick resume, because I'll give you an example. I'm playing MLB The Show religiously, and I'll exit out of it and turn it off, and I'll go downstairs and turn it on, and quick resume shows up on the screen. It says quick resume, even though it's not in quick resume.
But let me throw a correction in there, Court, for you, because this happened multiple times in a row, even after closing the program and reopening it.
Oh, wow. Okay. So it's just, they've got a bug.
Yeah. It sounds like just a bug when you load the game on Xbox specifically.
Yeah. I had that happen a couple times myself.
Yeah. So there are little nitpicky things that we have with performance that are in there. Also playing on Series S actually is for the most part a flawless experience because this game pretty much runs at a 60 frames per second or close to it throughout most of the experience, except for the cinematics, which were jarring at first because they went to 24 frames per second, I think, for the cinematics because they wanted to give it like the cinematic look to them. But it was weird going between 60 frames per second gameplay and then just instantly going to the 24 frames per second cinematics. But you get used to it pretty quickly. But on Series S in particular, there were a lot of frame drops during gameplay where sometimes it went down to 30 frames per second and sometimes even below that at certain times if there was a lot on screen. But
would you prefer they just lock it in at 30 on the S?
On the S specifically,
because I have on previous games that I played that are on both gens, I wish they would just because it gets annoying when you can see it, and I'm like, just lock it in so I don't see it.
Well, here's the thing: it didn't happen enough to make me want them to do that. Where it was like specific times, especially in the later trilogies or the later movies. So 6, 7, 8, and 9 specifically, when there's a lot going on the screen, like the Starkiller base sequence on Series S specifically is like, I'm amazed it even runs at all. So, whereas other sequences, it's great. So
the space fights and flights are the best. Better than Rogue Squadron. Like I didn't like Rogue Squadron that much, and I love Star Wars. I love the flying and how it works and how they did the levels and did the Starkiller base and they did the Death Star. Like they did such a good job. Or when you're Han Solo and you're getting away from everybody, you have to go through the asteroid field. I thought they did a phenomenal job, and the controls on it were fantastic. I was shocked because in previous Lego games, I've hated flying. Hated it.
I definitely think it's much more improved this time around, but I would disagree. I like Rogue Squadron 2 Rogue Leader way better than the flight in this game. But I still think it's like closer to that than we've had from any modern Star Wars game. And I have to at least show some kind of appreciation for that for sure.
And I also felt for some reason, and I don't know what it is, I felt the level design was better in 3, 4, and 5 and 6, 7, and 7, 8, 9. 1, 2, and 3, for some reason, it was bland and it looked boring half the time. It was like every planet looked the same. And I was just like, it looked dark and dreary a lot. It was just this gray planet. And like you were on one planet, you're on another planet. I'm like, wasn't I just on this planet? Like I didn't see much of a difference.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
At the same time, there's one section in particular of episode 3 that I loved, which was like the Mustafar section. In episode 3, I thought that was a highlight for the game for me, particularly.
Well, we know friend of the show, Sean's favorite part is when you get to Jar Jar's planet. Like,
oh, of course,
that's his favorite character in all of Star Wars. I don't know if anybody who's listening, Sean Capri loves Jar Jar Binks. Like, tweet at him, message him, send him Jar Jar Binks toys. That guy loves Jar Jar Binks. It's his favorite Star Wars character.
I mean, the fact that it forces you to play with Jar Jar for large sections of episode 1, I know.
But I do love the fact that they have fun with it.
Yeah,
like the cutscenes with Jar Jar, they have fun with it, and they play off how
they know how people feel about Jar Jar.
Yeah,
it's very evident about that.
I actually watched a whole video on Jar Jar, and they when they made the movies, their inspiration for him was Goofy, like 100%, not even a little bit. They were like, well, he's just Goofy, and they thought that was a thing that we should do.
I mean,
but that's Sean Capri's favorite character, so I don't want to talk ill of Jar Jar Binks.
Of course not. Of course not. We don't want to do that here. But, we're 45 minutes into this conversation. We should probably, start rounding the corner on this conversation because as you can tell, we probably talk about this game all day. So let's move to final thoughts. And the question that I always like to ask as well is like, if I was someone who, number one, and I'll give you 2 scenarios. Number one, if I've never played, if I don't care about Star Wars, one, should I play this game? But if I do care about Star Wars, is this a day one buy? Court, tell me right now, what do you think?
If you don't care about Star Wars, no. If you do care about Star Wars, it's a day one buy, not even. If you don't care about Star Wars, like any Lego game, they're fun, but you can wait a year and they're like $20. Like Lego games go on sale and they go on sale quick and they are cheap. It is a mind waster that you can do and just play along. But if you are a Star Wars fan, you have to play this game. Like you have to play this game.
Nice. Well, for me, my recommendation is a little bit different. Obviously, if you're not a Star Wars fan, it's a tough sell with this one. I think it's still probably a fun game you could play, as a family, play some co-op together. And play that way, as Court's kind of alluded to. So I think from that perspective, it's probably okay. But otherwise, I would steer clear from it if you don't care about Star Wars. If you do care about Star Wars, but you don't like collectathons, this is not a day one buy for me. This is a wait for sale. I wouldn't pick it up right away because I don't think there's enough meat on the bones for just the thing. Especially if you're just playing by yourself, like I am. Like I would not play it just for the single player campaign at full price. I think at that point, you're probably looking for a sale for this one. And again, it's a WB game and a lot of times their games go on sale quite regularly, kind of like Ubisoft does. So I would wait for that. Otherwise, to Court's point though, if you like collectathons and you're a huge Star Wars fan, then yes, this is probably a day one buy for sure. And as a Star Wars fan, if you're a fan of Star Wars and you like the Lego games, you should play this at some point. I will agree with that point. Like, and you need to play this game. Essentially.
It's fun and they play off. They even make jokes from previous Lego games and put them in, which I was like, all right, like the person new to the series or had never played them because it's funny now how old we are. I'm like, oh my God, the other games came out like when I was in my 20s, on PC, right? Like I didn't even like come out on console right away. Like it's a totally different thing. It's like 20 years old. So some of these jokes people don't get, but I was like, oh my God, they made a joke to the original Lego game. Like, well done. Like, that's awesome. And even the mumble mode itself. So if you're a fan of the Star Wars games and Lego games in itself, you're going to get this anyways. But to Ryan's point, the game will be like $20 in a couple months. Like
exactly. Sure, and again, if you're not into collectathons, like I think
there's a lot to collect.
It's good to wait for sure.
Yeah. If Ubisoft games make you cringe based on how much you have to do in it, that's not story, don't buy this game.
Yeah, exactly. Or just don't buy it right away. Get it on sale for sure. But anyways, we got to get going. Before we go, Court Plugs go.
Well, people can find me now at Carpool Gaming. I am now one of the new hosts of the PlayStation Drive. But if you want to find me on Twitter, I'm at Court Lalonde. And you can find everything there. But you know what? Why don't you go check out our Patreon at Carpool Gaming at patreon.com.
Very nice, my friend. As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on Twitter at Carpool Gaming, on YouTube at youtube.com/Carpool Gaming, and on podcast services around the globe. So for Court Lalonde, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been The Extra Mile, all about Lego Star Wars, The Skywalker Saga, and we're out.